New Forest, where I used to live until a while ago, they get more and more cars loads of visitors every weekend, particularly since they built the M3 motorway. And I think now it's got to the point where, at peak, they get 60,000 cars at a weekend. And the authorities there, thinking it would help them to solve the problems of the place and run it properly, decided to try and find out how these visitors behaved. And so, by all means of observation, including a helicopter camera, they set out to do so, and a very interesting thing emerged, and that is that the majority of these people never go more than 25 yards from their motor cars. They park their motor cars and they spend all their time until they get back into them within 25 yards of the vehicle that brought them there. Many of these people will say to you that we love the country. Well, personally, I think that the worst possible way to get to know the country is from motor car. There's only one real way to get to know the country, and that's on your flat feet, walking. So perhaps I can get you up for a minute to come for a walk with me. My pony Ghost will carry your bag. This is the route where people always traveled this way in the old days. In fact, if your name is Packer, there must be a lot of people in England whose name is Packer, it means that your ancestors made their living this way, because through all the centuries in which Britain had her riches from wool, from what was called the wool staple, the great export of British wool to the rest of the world, and particularly to the continent, during all that time, the shepherds were working up on the tops here with their flocks. Nobody else lived up there. Villages were down in the valleys. Only the shepherds' huts and big wool barns. Sometimes you'll see them still on the tops here. Just a single building, a big wool barn, and that's where the wool clip was put after the shearing took place, and the great wool sacks were stacked up in the barns. And then the packers came with their pack ponies in order to take it down to the weaving towns in the valley and down on to the ports too, from which it was exported, and each pony had 2 of the big wool sacks. You probably know the size of the wool sacks if you've been to Houses of Parliament. Of course, the Lord Chancellor sits on one, which is a memory of the time when Britain's riches came from the wool from these tops. And the packers came, not with just one pony, like my Ghost, but with trains of pack ponies along these tops, exactly like the mule trains that you see when you watch Western films. In fact, the history of Britain was repeated all over again in America, because they opened up the wilderness in America in the same way as the wilderness of Britain had been opened up, and by the same methods, several centuries earlier. And the packers, I'm sorry to say, were very wild men. They had to be pretty tough in order to protect themselves and their loads from marauding people, of whom there were plenty in those days. And also, like cowboys, they spent long time traveling in lonely places, and when they finally got down to the village, they made straight for the pub. And it was always said in the old days that you locked up your daughters when the packers were coming. So it may be a respectable surname, Packer, but it has at least some other inferences. There was also a man called a packman who traveled the same way. There's a difference between a packer and a packman. A fewer people called packman today. And the reason for that is that the packman was the peddler. This is interesting. This particular spot is an old Roman road, and on it, undisturbed by grazing or ploughing, are anthills. It's extraordinary how difficult it is to see anthills nowadays, but those are old-fashioned anthills of the sort that you could very easily stumble over a pony when I was young. And what do you think grows on it? The wild thyme. A bank on which the wild thyme grows. And this one, this is a rare little flower. I'm always stymied when I come to tell you the name of it. It's a beautiful name, actually. It begins Q-W-I-N, Quinn something. I've lost it again. Anyway, there it is. And there's Ghost having a taste of the old-fashioned herbage. Hardly grass, dozens of different herbs in it. Just what a horse loves. The packman, as I say, was the peddler. And his packs, either side of his pony, were full of all the things that people wanted in the houses which they couldn't get, except on very rare occasions when they went to fairs in the district. His pack was full of everything from candles to needles to sewing thread to ribbons to spoons and all the things people wanted. And the packman came round and unfolded his packs at the back door of the farm. Because I'm not walking like this for any of these professional reasons. I'm walking, as I say, because it's the real way to see the countryside. When we were children, we walked. We walked 3 miles to school, and we usually walked 5 miles back, because you had to get to school on time, and therefore you stuck to the road, and you walked there fairly fast. But on the way back, you could wander, and we wandered all over the countryside, up the hedges, sometimes as safe to say with a ferret and a net in our pocket. But anyway, every day we took a new route home, and we knew every inch of those few square miles of country. We knew where every blackbird's nest, where every flower bloomed, where every rabbit berry was, where every pigeon's nest was, where the fox had its earth, and everything. And that is the way to get to know the countryside, to walk it. And it's far better to walk around on 2 square miles of countryside for 4 or 5 years of your life than motor 1,000 miles across England if you really want to know the countryside. Every year, with a pony like Ghost, I used to walk the whole length of the old Ridgeway, the great road that King Alfred travelled when he fought the Danes. And I used to walk it with a pony. It was from the Thames right down over to the Marlborough Downs and then on to Salisbury Plain. It was about 60 miles. And indeed, you only crossed a metal road about 3 times on the route. An absolutely amazing walk with unbelievable views across 4 or 5 counties of England. Talking of the packmen, this is interesting. This is an actual pack horse bridge built to take the strings of pack ponies over this stream when it was in flood. And it was built in the 11th century, the reign of King John. Anyway, we used to walk the Ridgeway. It was a pony older than Ghost. He's a bit of a thruster. It was a pony that just walked at the right pace on a loose rope behind you. Trouble about him, he's still a young fellow and he's trying to get you to walk on his pace. But he'll settle down to it. And it takes you to some extraordinary places. This is one of the most interesting country house parks I know. That, for instance, to start with, that is a private chapel that's belonged to this family and this family only for centuries, and in a tiny little graveyard behind it, all the members of that family are buried. They were never buried in their own churchyard, in any other churchyard except their own. And now we part in front of the wall of the stable yard, and it will be of particular interest to hunting people, though nobody else will know what I'm talking about, that those are Peter Beckford's stables. That is, this is also the house at which the first pack of hounds of England was ever founded in 1730, in the 18th century, and it's got a number of relics of the 18th century in it. In fact, we're just about to come to it any minute, I think. We have to cross this bridge first. Ghost doesn't like this bridge very much. You can see him placing his feet pretty carefully and looking at the planks, but still, there's one thing about him. He'll never do a wrong thing, even if he's feeling nervous doing the right thing. See how his ears are pricked, and he's looking at those planks. It feels wrong to him and it sounds wrong to him, but he's safely over the other side. And this is what I was talking about, the relics of the 18th century. These trees almost always grow near water. I wonder how many people can tell me what they are. I'm sure those interested in good old English food will have read about these many times, but have they ever seen one? It's a medlar. That's a medlar tree. In the old days they made medlar jelly, one of the most delicious things to put on bread and butter. And they also ate them as dessert, and when they do that, they used to leave them until they were practically rotted. I think the medlar mush that they ate as dessert must have been pretty disgusting. But I have had the medlar jelly, and I can tell you that's pretty good. The trouble, of course, about walking the Ridgeway, as I used to every year, is that now the people who don't want to walk, who think they require the aid of internal combustion engines, have started to use it. Still, it's a free country. The only thing to do, of course, is to keep away. The trouble is there's more and more places you have to keep away from. I was told by a friend of mine who does the statistics for the National Farmers Union that in the last 21 years we have lost countryside equal to twice the size of the county of Berkshire. 2 counties, so to speak, of England have disappeared under concrete and under houses and development. And as far as I remember, we've only got 50 counties. But I think there'll be some cracks to live in as long as I'm here, and while there are, Ghost and I will keep walking.